and emotional problems coming out of these prisons. We're locked down most of the time 23 hours, sometimes 24 hours a day. A lot of times our food be cold. You see people be mistreated in the prison system. And, you know, you do find some officers that come in and do their job, you know, because it's a job they have to do, and you find some that mistreat people, you know. But when you're talking about on an emotional and mental level, the prison really bother people. And I can say now, this will be my 5th year out, and I still deal with a lot of mental problems that I have to face and address every day. Basically, I daydreamed a lot, I read a lot, I prayed, I worked out. And when I read, I basically tried to envision that was me in the book. Whether it was a Western book, whether it was a dog book, me training the dog, whatever it was, I wanted that person to be me. And I didn't want my mind to be trapped inside a prison. But at that time, I didn't know that's what I was actually doing. I thought that I was just reading and doing things to buy by the time, you know, but it actually helped me out in a lot of ways.
Isn't cruel and unusual punishment against the law? What about supermax prisons?
Under Supreme Court jurisprudence, supermax prisons do not qualify as cruel and unusual punishment. And cruel and unusual punishment is a concept that stems out of the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. And it's very difficult to meet that standard. But, and again, in supermaxes, and even many children that are in adult prisons are in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, out 1 hour a day to shower and recreation, but that's it. But unfortunately, under the law, that does not qualify as cruel and unusual punishment. But I think we do, and we have been working here at the ACLU on looking at these conditions of confinement, particularly around solitary confinement and what they result in. And what we see that they result in is oftentimes people having very serious mental illness, not being able to readjust themselves once they're out of solitary confinement, readjust themselves to the outside world, and not being able to successfully re-enter society once their sentence is up and they've been in solitary confinement for many years. I think the worst example of solitary confinement in this country is the Angola 3. Down in Angola prison, now Angola 2, because Robert King, who was one of the Angola 3 who was in solitary confinement for over 20 years, has been released. But the other 2 members of the Angola 3 are still currently in solitary confinement and have been in solitary confinement for over 30 years.
America tries to say that they do not do torture, and they do. Last month, June, is the international month for torture, to observe torture in the world. And we had a few events here, and United Nations presented an event where they showed that the United States does do torture, and the fact of solitary confinement, that's considered a form of torture, and that's considered cruel and unusual punishment. And in America's supermax prisons, which there are about 12 all across the country, they are called supermax because, quote unquote, the worst of the worst go there, the most horrific crime, Jeffrey Dahmer, those kinds of people. There are also, some of them are underground, never seeing the light. These prisoners spend 23 hours of 24 hours a day in prison. They're let out for 1 hour to do whatever it is they need to do, and they're put back in there. They have no visitation from their families. Some of them are allowed visitation once a quarter. Even their attorneys, who in this country you have due process, are not allowed to see them on a regular basis. And they're in these prisons for years, some of them 7 and 10 years, in solitary confinement. And that is, according to the United Nations, considered a form of torture and cruel and unusual punishment.
On the streets of D.C., I asked people their thoughts on the death penalty.
In some cases it's good, and in some cases it's bad. Especially, those places down south where they've been having problems, where people innocent have been convicted and executed. Then when they realize later that the person was innocent, the person is dead.
I'm not with it at all.
Why?
I disagree. I mean, why kill? They've been punished, they've been rehabilitated in jail, so why kill them?
I'm not for the death penalty.
Why?
I'm a humanitarian. I don't believe in killing people or animals.
Death penalty? Actually, I'm not in a favor of that, because you know, even if a person has really done something bad, he get like easy freedom, you know, just by the death. Like, yeah. So the suffering from his life is missing.
Many around the world view the death penalty as cruel and unusual punishment. Some countries won't extradite a prisoner from their country to the U.S. if they may face the death penalty in America. Death row conditions are harsh and inhumane in many parts of the United States. Prisoners are often allowed zero physical contact with family members, friends, or even their attorneys. Texas has even put to death someone who was mentally retarded. In 2006, the Human Rights Commission recommended that the United States assess the extent to which the death penalty is disproportionately imposed on minorities and other low-income groups. Here's what our professionals had to say about the death penalty.
I think more black people get sentenced to death. And I think the death penalty is it's not right. Like Illinois a few years ago let all these people off death row. Why? Because it's not given out right. You know, it's a lot of flaws and holes in the death penalty. You know, and it's been proven that some innocent people have been killed, you know, that was on death row. And so, and if this is the case, why is it still here?
The people who are poor, who can't afford the money to get the good attorneys who will get them out of prison. We have the Innocence Project here in the United States that has, as of today, has gotten out, I think it's 37 people off of death row. Amazingly, last week, the state of Illinois has completely gotten rid of the death penalty, which took 10 years for us to work on to get rid of the death penalty in Illinois. We do have a couple of states who are putting moratoriums on the death penalty because they're finding out that there are people who are lying in the system. That's what happened in Illinois. They have a Chicago police officer, the chief of police, who is in jail right now. Trying to fight that he didn't mock and mess up evidence and put innocent people in jail. They found at least 13, I think it is now, but they're working on his case. And the governor had to stop it. There are people who work in the crime labs who are creating things. There are people who are coercing witnesses to say things that happened, that didn't happen. So there are a lot of people who are on death row who don't belong on death row.
Death penalty is similar to many other similar to many other harsh sentences in this country, and many other crimes. Disproportionately, people of color, African Americans, Latinos are sentenced to the death penalty, and interestingly enough, it's oftentimes based on who was involved in the murder. In this country, you do have to be involved in a murder to get the death penalty. But oftentimes, you see if it's a person who murders a black person or a person of color in this country, they're less likely to get the death penalty than if they murder a white person. But the realization about the death penalty in this country is it's very expensive. And we know of many people now who have been sentenced to death, and later has been found out that they have been either innocent of the crime or technically should not have gotten the death penalty. And so it's something that we really can't, I mean, that's when you make a mistake with the death penalty, you can't turn back. There's no turning back. There's no, releasing someone from prison. There's no, and even people who spend many, many years, 25, 26, 27 years on death row, they can't get that time back if they're innocent. They can't get that time back in terms of their life. And so it's something that we as a country really have to look at in terms of the fact that we are really an outlier on the death penalty. There are not a lot of countries in this world that still subject people to execution. And we are becoming more of an outlier in terms of that, and particularly in terms of the number of people that we execute every year.
High rates of incarceration have done little to stem the tide of crime in America. Something else needs to be done.
I think we have to look at changing the laws, first of all. I mean, because in a lot of cases, whether it's state or federal law, that's what results in this alarming number of people who are incarcerated in this country, and the number of people who, for example, we subject to the death penalty as well. We also have to look at this issue of lawyers and lawyers who are representing people and their ability to represent people, and the number of lawyers and the resources we have for people who are poor in this country. Because if you don't, again, if you're poor and you cannot afford a criminal defense lawyer or a expensive criminal defense lawyer, oftentimes that's the biggest disadvantage for you and the biggest indicator as to whether or not you're going to go to prison in this country. So I think we have to really look at our indigent defense system in this country and try to give our people who are indigent in this country the resources to be represented appropriately when they are up on criminal charges.
I think what needs to be done, they need to change the model of the prison. Stop worrying about the money so much and start worrying about the people that's in these institutions. I'm not saying people didn't break the law, some people didn't break the law, and some people don't deserve to be there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they need to understand that out of 100%, at least 90% of people have come home. So if we don't prepare these men and women to come home to society, what do we expect them to do when they come home? So it's not a place where they really rehabilitating people, but rehabilitation must start with self, but at the same time, you must have things in place for these men and women to prepare themselves to come home in society.
In America, to be changed, the judicial system, enough study has been done. We need to take that research and start implementing it. We need to take research to practice. We need to start in our school systems with our teachers and our principals and our PTA organizations and family organizations and create communities that trust each other, communities that won't create crime. Crime usually, again, is a crime of passion, or if you're robbing or stealing, it's because you're hungry. It's because of the situation that you're in. So if we change those things around that, I think we'll change the criminal justice system from the bottom. That's the grassroots. From the top, unfortunately, in this country, it's about economics. And fortunately, we're seeing that. In the past 2 years in this economic crunch that America has had, a lot of leaders are seeing, state and local and federal leaders are seeing that they're spending too much money on punishment and crime. And the criminal justice system is emptying their coffers. And instead of doing that, they're starting to see that there are better ways to treat these situations. Drug courts are one of them, where instead of putting someone in jail, you give them treatment.
America is eager to point her finger at someone else's human rights violations while her own violations are glaring. Inmates are suffering on a daily basis with their rights being violated constantly. America, if justice is blind, open your eyes to these problems. For Press TV in Washington, I'm Nisa Islam.